There's always going to be key influencers, key players in that organization. What is your relationship with them? And if it's not strong, you need to go make it strong. If it's not there, you need to go create it.
Welcome to Promoted with Denise Harris, where I bring insightful conversations with top industry leaders and experts to share fresh perspectives and the actionable strategies and insider tips you need to elevate your career and get promoted. Today, we're diving into what it truly means to redefine leadership and amplify influence. And I couldn't think of a better guest to explore this with than Tamara Fields. As the U.S. public service industry lead at Accenture, Tamara is at the forefront of driving innovation and efficiency in government operations, making real impact on communities across the country. She also serves as the Office Managing Director for Accenture in Austin, Texas, where she's shaping the future of leadership, talent, and business strategy. With over 2 decades of experience leading complex transformations, Tamara is passionate about fostering high-performing teams and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Get ready for an insightful conversation on leadership, influence, and the power of innovation. Welcome, Tamara. We're so happy to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much, Denise. I'm excited to be here with you today. I think it's so wonderful that you do this podcast and open up another opportunity for people to learn and grow and really just hear people's stories.
Well, it's my pleasure. And look, I have a lot to talk to you about, so if it's okay, I'm going to jump right on in.
Absolutely. I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay. So, Tamara, your career at Accenture has been marked by significant leadership roles and industry impact. Looking back, was there a defining moment or key decision that kind of set you on this path to executive leadership?
I think it's really interesting. I think we all have defining moments in our career, and sometimes those are generated by life, right? And, I think early in my life, when I was young, about 12, right? A long time ago, before we had all this technology in the world of technology, you kind of got basic jobs out there: doctor, lawyer, right? Policeman, fireman. And I wanted to be a lawyer. And I just knew that that's what I was going to do. So I had a plan. I was going to go to school. I went to business school. I wanted to graduate and I was going to be a corporate lawyer. So I planned to work in business when I graduated. And I thought, oh, I'll work about 5 years and I'll go back to law school. And I hit that 5 year moment and I was determined to go. And someone asked me a question. Well, why do you like what you do? And I was like, yes, I do. I really love it. Do you like where you work? And I was like, yes, I do. I like where I work. And they're like, well, why are you trying to leave it? And I was like, well, because I have a plan, and my plan was to become a lawyer. I decided this when I was 12, and they were like, well, you're not 12 anymore, and plans and life can change. You should really think about it. And so they challenged me, and at first I was a little affronted, but then I spent some time and decided, in true fashion, I did a business case,
Okay.
and I looked at the pros and cons, both qualitative and quantitative, with going to law school and starting over again, where I would be when I'd go, why I liked it, all of that. At the end of that, I concluded that I should stay where I was. And if I was going to stay where I was, if I was going to, be here, then I should make an approach to get to the highest level of executive level that I can within this company because I liked it, I enjoyed it. And so that's what I did. I made a decision at that point to stay at Accenture and really shift my focus around moving up the ladder, gaining knowledge, gaining skills, and putting myself in a position to be promoted.
Yeah, clearly. And I know you've been there for quite some time, right? I mean, it's been, I don't want to date you or anything, but it's been quite a few years.
Yes, it's definitely been more than 2 decades. It's been more than a
Okay.
quarter of a century. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And in that time, you've successfully led large scale transformation. What leadership traits have been most critical to your success in driving impactful change? Because, from year to year, things happen.
Absolutely. I mean, you know what I think is most interesting, and it's such an interesting thing because I just was talking to one of my business coaches last this week on it, and I realized that when I'm focused on clients, I am wholly focused on solving for them, solving for their agenda, their goals, their strategy, solving for their pain points, right? And when you do that, right, you shift your mindset around how do I put the client at the center of who I'm serving and what I'm serving about, and then remembering that they themselves have a customer. And
Mhm.
in some cases, right, it could be the military, it could be a citizen, it could be, right, there's because I work in public service. And so in when you think about that, it really helps you understand that there's an accountability of servant leadership at my level and at their level. And when you take your eyesight off yourself and you put your eyes on who you're serving and what they're trying to solve for, then it's a lot easier to get to the transformation, because transformations are hard, change is hard. Fundamentally, people are, even if they're not satisfied always with the results that they're receiving, generally don't want to go through all the effort to change it because it just seems too difficult, too complex. And so instead, what you do is you start to break it down into simple pain points. Let us solve this pain point. Let us solve this pain point. And very soon you have an integrated set of pain points that you solve for that then enables modular change that then can enable enterprise change. And so sometimes you've got to break down the puzzle pieces and focus on the puzzle piece so that you can get to the entire puzzle of the transformation.
Yeah, I love that. And sometimes there are more pieces than what you started with.
Yes, that's true. I mean,
And you got to be ready for that.
I think you unveil pieces along the journey, and you have to be able to adapt to that unveiling. And
Mhm.
sometimes the puzzle pieces have to fit together differently than you originally anticipated.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. You know, leadership is evolving. It's evolving beyond traditional hierarchies. I mean, it's just different today. I wonder, how do you define leadership today? And what shifts do you think are necessary for leaders to stay relevant and impactful?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to answer that from two perspectives. I think, probably about, at least a decade ago, I really started to change my leadership style. By nature, I can be command and control, and I don't think that always yields the best result. It's not a bad leadership style. It's just that sometimes you miss opportunities to listen and hear, and I still have to really very intentionally force myself, because when you're tired, you have a lot on your plate, you have limited time, it's very easy to default to behavioral patterns, right? Differently than you intend, right? But I believe one, leaders should be intentional. I believe two, leaders have to really listen. I believe three, leaders have to show curiosity. And I think leaders have to be in a position to leverage their teams. And leaders have to be in a position to guide their teams. And so for me, a big part of that is leadership vulnerability. And so I really shifted as a leader to really be showing myself authentic by being vulnerable and showing that I don't always have the answers, by showing that sometimes I'm not going to always get it perfectly correct, right? But what I am committed to is their success and our success, and that I believe we do that together as a team, jointly united in a common mission to deliver an end result or an outcome. And what I have found is showing up in that very vulnerable way, recognizing that life happens to me both personally and professionally,
Mhm.
and helping people understand that really helped me to start to create and cultivate very strong, loyal, high performing teams, because then they could come to that team in a very authentic way. They could recognize that they're juggling life, personal, and professional. We could all support each other. And as you know, it all ebbs and flows. And
Right.
sometimes I've got to be strong for a period or lean in more. And other times others have to lean in more for me and vice versa. And that's what really drives our team forward successfully. And so I think leaders today, this is important because we are in a time of unprecedented change. We are in a continual technology revolution, and it's going to continue for another decade plus. And so, as a leader, you have to become the stable force for your team in this time of change. And the way you do that is acknowledging truth, acknowledging realities by at the same time motivating on how to move forward and how to transition through the change. And you do that from a place of honesty, transparency, vulnerability, and listening so that you're pulling in as many data points as you can to help you and the team be successful.
Yeah. I love that. And I think when you talk about teams being able to follow you and wanting to follow you, and you talk about vulnerability, that's an interesting combination because the reality is that you also have to develop this trust,
Yeah.
right? I mean, in order for any team to be like, yeah, I'll go with you anywhere, and particularly in this volatile environment that we're having, they have to believe that you're taking them into the right place, right? I mean, and I think the trust is the foundation for that. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree. I mean, I don't know that you can have successful leadership without trust.
Right.
Now, that
Agreed.
doesn't mean every person that works for you will trust you because sometimes they align you to the organization and they might trust you as an individual and not trust the organization you work for. And so it's all an integrated, complex, interwoven consideration. But I fundamentally believe that still people quit people, not organizations, and that at the end of the day, trust is the foundation. But how do you gain trust without transparency, honesty, and authenticity? That has to be a part of that journey as well.
And I think that that leads me to something else that I've been thinking about, and that's around challenges that women face today in seeking promotions for elevated roles within corporations. And what should women be paying attention to right now in the workplace? I mean, it's clear that there's all this change going on. It's clear that, we need to develop trust as a foundation, but times are a changing. And when you're in this corporate setting and you're doing everything you can, and you also want to be in the forefront, what should women be paying attention to right now?
I think more than anything is sometimes you have to ignore the noise, and we've got to remember that we're here to do a job. And as part of that job is we've got to be the experts at the job we do. So they've got to lean into, just like I have to lean into, what does it mean to be an expert in my job? What skills do I need to have? What knowledge do I need to have? How are those skills and knowledge changing? And how do I keep myself relevant with that? So, for example, Gen AI is all the conversation in the rage. But what does generative AI mean to me? How am I getting myself cognizant and knowledgeable on this topic area? Because it's very broad. And how am I keeping my skills up to date in that conversation? I think you've got to really make sure you're always relevant. And so,
Yeah.
investing in your skill set and your knowledge base is exceptionally important. I think the second thing as women that we have to do is we have to always lean into our existing network and expand our network always and recognize that that network is always changing. And when I talk about network, I'm not talking about knowing 100 people. I'm talking about those key individuals that you need to know that are essential to how you execute your job, but also how the company itself runs or the organization you're in runs. There's always going to be key influencers, key players in that organization. What is your relationship with them? And if it's not strong, you need to go make it strong. If it's not there, you need to go create it. Right. And so you got to be part of answering the responsibility of building, expanding, leaning into key relationships anywhere that you work, so that when you need help or opportunities come, your name can be part of that consideration or discussion.
Yeah, that is so important. And I tell my clients that, I tell women that all the time, that you can't be in a tunnel. You want to be because there's so much going on that you want to focus. But the reality is that building relationships is so much a part of your success and everybody's success. I mean, I think there's reciprocity, right? And really being able to understand who you are as a person, what you bring to the organization, and how can we leverage each other.
Yes, absolutely. I think when I really think about my career, I feel very grateful and thankful because I've really just had several just wonderful individuals at different points in my career who were just really helpful in helping me move forward to the next level. And then in addition to that, I've just had some great mentors as well who've
Mhm.
just been with me on the journey. So they help me think about taking on new opportunities. They help me think about how to refresh or rethink about or reframe my own skill set. Because another thing we do sometimes is that we have self limiting beliefs. And those self limiting beliefs can keep us from thinking about what happens next in our career. And like we often can miss opportunities because we believe that a certain role or job isn't a good fit with our skill set. And that just may not be true. And so sometimes we need others to help us reframe or rethink the way we think about our skills.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about the mindset that's needed that has helped you in particular build influence and credibility in spaces where you may have been the only or one of few. I mean, you're in a huge organization, right? I mean, so I'm sure there are not that many individuals that look like you. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't always that way. But I'm curious, what's the mindset, Tamara, that you should have? I mean, how do you build influence and credibility in those types of spaces?
What I've decided is that if you only ever spend your time focusing on what isn't, you can miss what is.
Mm,
And so I'm a big believer that what you really have to do when you go into any space is understand the people in that space and really take time and opportunity to know them as individuals and people because we're
yes.
all humans. And when we break down the conversation to us being humans, then we're really able to embrace each other in that way, learn from each other, help each other, and expand each other. And that can break down barriers.
Yeah. So critical to be able to and I think today, it's difficult because the workplace is changing. And it's remote, right? So we don't have that in-person connection. You don't really get to, pop into somebody's office or grab lunch with someone or sit down and ideate with multiple people because it's through the screen now. So I imagine that does put a little bit of a barrier in the way of, developing those relationships and getting to know people.
I think two things. We have moved to a hybrid world. So I would say that a lot of entities, corporations, organizations, cities, schools really are moving back into office at least some of the days of the week. And I will tell you that if I can meet in person, it's my preference. And that is
Yeah.
what I do. That's what I ask for. So I just say, are there days that you're working in the office? I'm happy to come in on that day. And I have found that that's been really helpful because I believe in that in person connection. But when we do have to meet virtually, then I still think that you have an opportunity to get to know each other as part of that. And you can set the tone of that conversation by how you choose to lean in and start it, right? And so I usually lean in with telling a funny story about where I am or what I'm doing, whatever it is. And that kind of breaks it down because I think, again, we're all human. There is always something that we have in common. There's always something that we can be excited about together. And the goal is to find what that something is.
You have to be intentional. Right? I
Absolutely.
mean, it's worth it, but you have to be intentional about it. And two things can be true. We don't necessarily always have to be in the office together, but wow, what a blessing when we do get to meet in person
Absolutely.
and we leverage the time that we're on the screen. So I think two things can be true. And that leads me, I want to talk a little bit now about talent development. And just in reading about you and speaking with you, I know how deeply involved you are in talent development.
Mhm.
What role has mentorship or sponsorship played in your career? And how do you think women can, seek promotion through cultivating those types of relationships?
Yeah, I absolutely would not have been promoted without sponsorship. Sponsorship is always critical for anyone, right? There's got to be someone that believes in your story, that is willing to sponsor and support how you show up and how you move forward. That sees your end results and is willing to advocate and talk on your behalf. And then I would say, in regards to sponsorship, right? I remember many years ago. This was kind of probably my first, big promotion point of manager to senior manager. And I had a managing director of what we call partners at the time, and I was working a project. And on this project, our client was having some challenges. Who was with one of my leaders at the time, and so our big leader came down and said, "Hey, we're transitioning this person up out." But the client has really appreciated how you've shown up, and they feel very comfortable with you leading this team and kind of taking on the ownership of both levels. How do you feel about that? And I was like, I'm up to the challenge. I'm willing to do it. Thank you for the opportunity. So one, he was willing to give me a chance, right? Then I executed on that, and because of how I executed on that, he came back down. And he was like, and he was, very supportive throughout the whole process. He was like, I really appreciated how you work, how you showed up. I like people who get things done and are successful. Can you help me with this? Right. So it started by one ask, and I completed that ask successfully. And he gave me something else, and then he gave me something else, and he gave me something else. And then over time, right, we didn't call it sponsorship, but he was clearly a sponsor because he just kept giving me opportunities. And he would call me up and be like, "Hey, Tamara, I need this done," because he had trust in me and he had seen what I was able to do. And so he just really leaned in. And at that point, he really did just lean in. He leaned in and helping me have the right coaches and people leads, and that I was tied into the right organization. And he was fundamental in helping me get promoted. And I'm truly thankful to him because also he let me just shadow him. I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from him around negotiations and how to handle difficult conversations. And like he just let me, trail around behind
Yeah.
him, and also watching how he handled conversations, how he managed the client taught me additionally beyond what I already understood. And he is directly responsible for that first major promotion point that I got to when I made partner. And I'm very thankful to him. And so I say, sponsorships are critical. I think in the same token, you got to have mentors because sometimes you just need some people to vent to or talk to just give you a different perspective. And I have one that is just, she's been with me at every single point in my career. She's helped make connections for me. But the thing that I like most about her is she always was there to help me reframe because sometimes we get very emotional and work is not always emotional.
Yeah.
And so that can cloud our judgment and it can make us see things through colored eyeglasses, and they can help unfog your eyeglasses so that
Yeah.
you can see clearly.
And you also got to know, like, when you're in your head and you're creating a narrative, right, that may
Yes,
not even be true. Because
that's
that's a
correct.
big piece. If you start believing that something is really nothing, right, and you start to just feel like, okay, I've got this story in my head that I'm not enough, or it's going to be too hard, or that's not something that I should be doing, you start to limit yourself. And I think, just listening to what you're saying, the other piece about it is that it sounds like you were willing to be uncomfortable.
Yes,
I mean, and that's a big thing, right? Because
yes.
sometimes people want to do things that they feel that they already know, but the juice, the power is really in learning stuff, right? Being willing to make a mistake, being willing, and I always say that scientists have another word for mistakes. They don't use mistake. They use data. That's it. Like, it's data. If something doesn't go right, something doesn't go the way that we had anticipated, that's data. That's something that I now can use that I know a little bit more. And so there has to be a willingness to be uncomfortable because you don't know something, a willingness to take a risk so that you can learn something. And that's really the kind of the pathway to growth.
I 100% agree. We often say you've got to learn how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable,
That's right.
and you have to be willing to drink from a fire hose sometimes. And you
True.
also have to be willing to learn on your own.
Yeah.
But that's why you create foundations and access points, right? Because people can help you learn. And anytime I take on a new role, I need someone to help me learn how to do that job and have perspective on the job or who had the job previously, right? And I think it's about how do we enable and lean into that. I think sometimes people really struggle asking for help because sometimes people see asking for help as failure, but really you should see asking for help as empowerment.
Yes. Absolutely. You put up a barrier when you don't ask for help.
You do. But we don't realize we're putting up a barrier
Mhm.
when you don't ask for help, right? Because I think sometimes we're trained to be self sufficient, and there's nothing wrong with self sufficiency. You do need to be able to operate independently, and you need to be able to critically think and pull a story together and execute against that goal, strategy, outcome. But the reality is you don't have to do it alone.
That's true. And you got to be able to navigate the waters, right? I mean, you don't go into every situation knowing everything, and you shouldn't have to. But I think the ability to say, "Hey, I need some help," or "What do you know? Are you willing to share some expertise?" Again, that's how you sort of move within an organization, develop those relationships, get to know the lay of the land. I mean, that's all a part of it.
It is absolutely a part of it. And I think that sometimes we don't give ourselves enough time when we first enter an organization in a role to just get the lay of the land. And sometimes it's okay to just be silent initially. Yes, people might be creating points of view on you, they might be judging you, they might be assessing you in the situation. But what's even more important is for you to gain information so that you can really figure out what is going to be your 90-day, 120-day plan.
Yeah. And you always have to have a plan. Like I don't at this level, I never advise that you go into anything without a plan. I think you need one. You got to start to build it.
Yes, and I think again, sometimes you're not going to have all aspects of the plan. So it's
Right.
about what level of the plan you have and to what degree do you need it to be in before you start moving, because you also can't wait too long when you're in seat, right? But I think that's the balance that we all have to navigate every day when we're navigating new situations.
Yeah, so very true. I want to talk a little bit now, Tamara, about teams because you do a lot of work with developing and leading high performing teams. And I know for a fact that that's a key indicator of leadership effectiveness. And it's also a sign that you can be promoted, right? I mean, the fact that you've got a great team, the fact that you have fellowship, that you can get people in alignment, but I'm curious, how have you cultivated strong, results-driven teams? And how do you think women can leverage that skill not only to drive business success, but also to position themselves for leadership opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to start with two angles or two aspects of that conversation. And the first, I'm going to start from an individual point of view, which is you have to have a really strong sense of your own leadership style and what are your strengths and weaknesses. And I think as leaders, sometimes, we all kind of laugh at the various leadership tests that they have out there, right? Like there's social styles, there's DISC, there's Myers Briggs, right? There's so many of them that are out there, but what I would say is that it is important for you to have a very keen and real understanding of what you do well and what you don't do as well, right? And so one of the items that our company embraces is called the Gallup Strengths Assessment.
Oh,
And so
yes,
it
very
lists
familiar.
all your strengths in order. So you can very quickly pull out your top 10. And I'm a huge fan of this survey because it really does dive deep in who you are, how you think, how you respond, how you interrelate, and that's important because what you don't want to do is have a lot of Tamaras on the same team. You can have some, right? Another Tamara, right? But you don't want to have all Tamaras, right? Like the reality is, I want to have some people on my team that represent the strengths that I don't have, right? So that they can shore up my weaknesses. And then, in addition to that, right, I have to empower and enable them to really lean into those strengths and bring them forward as part of the team and execute against it. So I think a big part of building high performing teams is you got to have a number two who has some of the strengths that you don't have, because then together y'all can really lean into how do you build out the remainder of the team. So that's the first thing I would say. As a leadership person, you need to know what you do well and what you don't do well, and have people around who can help with those areas that are not your strength. Because as they say, you can lessen your weaknesses, but they're still always your weaknesses. And so then
Absolutely.
that way you can lean into your strengths and really power the team from a strength position. In addition to that, I think when you're building high performing teams, is you got to help people lean into the roles that is going to bring out the best of who they are and where they can be what is their natural inclination and where they can really show up as their authentic selves. And part of that is tying their passion, their authenticity, right, and their role together all in one. And sometimes you have flexibility around that, sometimes you don't. I work in consulting, so I have a lot of flexibility around that. And what I have found is that when people work in an area that's a passion area, they work in an area that's mission oriented or purpose, or they work in an area that just naturally, enumerates their strengths, they just lean all the way into that. And
Yeah.
automatically, everybody else around them is going to benefit from that. And so the other thing you have to do is be willing to recognize when someone is in a role that just doesn't make sense for them. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean they're a failure. It just means that they're not in a role that really maximizes their strengths and who they are. Get them realigned to a different role so that you can get them to a place of success. And so, really actively managing through that is something that you have to do as a leader to get to high performing teams.
I mean, you've got to pay attention. Right?
Yes.
I mean, you've got to pay attention and you have to be in it. And just to go back to something you were saying earlier around the importance of listening. I mean, sometimes you got to be quiet, right? To hear what's going on and to understand what's happening within the environment. I think that's so key. Part of high performing teams is that everyone trusts each other, but they also understand what the strengths are from a collective perspective.
Yes, and I think, that's why we embrace Gallup, right? We do full team assessments. We understand how everybody maps on a grid, because part of that is learning each other. And you've got to create mechanisms that enables that learning and encourages that learning of each other as a team, as individuals, as well as, right, our business strengths and how we interact. I also think two other things that are important to high performing teams are you have to have culture, and you got to be intentional around your culture. Otherwise, culture is always there and it can create on its own. But it's much better when you intentionally create culture, meaning that you can identify the core values and the behaviors that you expect to see on your team, and you can identify what you value, lean into that, and demonstrate that. That can really create a positive team environment, a positive culture, and that also can really strengthen the team's performance because you can create a culture of innovation where every voice is heard, where thinking outside the box is valued and appreciated, or pulling for each other. Oh, you can't do this tonight because you have your kids' basketball game. Don't worry, I'll do that. Or hey, you know what? We're not going to put in these standing weekly meetings on this day and time because it really just doesn't work for half the team, right? So finding these other paths and ways of working that really enables culture in a positive way, that then adds an additional value to how we work, can also really promote high performing teams.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think the other piece of that, though, as I think about it, is the leader's influence, right? I
Mhm.
mean, and I think that's what you're talking about, right? I mean, because culture is created from the top, right? I mean, it's the leader's values. I mean, if you're valuing family and wellness and family time and saying, "Hey, I get it, you're not going to be able to be here tonight. We'll pick it up for you." That's also sending a message that we value and respect what you do outside of this organization. I mean, that's about the influence that a leader has. Would you agree?
I do. I mean, I definitely think it takes more than just a leader to create culture, but I do think the leader sets the culture and the expectation, just like they set the goal and the mission of the team. And as accountability as a leader to us achieving that goal or that mission outcome. And so, in the same vein, you can be intentional about rolling out that culture, living that culture, representing that culture, and also holding people accountable when they're not representing the culture.
100%. Absolutely. Now, a leader's impact isn't limited just to the company, right? I mean, it extends into the industry and the community. And so I'm curious, what intentional steps have you taken to amplify your own influence outside of your organization? And how has that shaped your own leadership journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think I believe in being active in the community. So
Mhm.
I would say that I've been very intentional around that. I'm a University of Texas at Austin graduate. I graduated from the Macomb School of Business, so I'm a Longhorn, and I'm still very active at school. I sit on the Macomb School of Business UT Advisory Council. I'm on the Board of Trustees for Paul Quinn College, which is a historically black college in Dallas, Texas. I sit as the board president currently for the Texas Conference for Women. I've spent many, many years on the Austin Chamber of Commerce on the executive committee in various roles and still sit on the innovation committee. And I think, again, that if you're passionate about something, you got to show up for it. And I think when you externally activate within your community, you're automatically going to be positively influenced by the people that you meet, the missions that they worry about and care about, the discussions they put on the table in front of you. And so, what I would say is that being involved and active in my community has deposited so much into me. I couldn't share it all on this call. It's not possible because um, you learn so much. You learn so much about how our city operates, how my state operates. I've learned so much about how people operate, what it means to be a servant leader. I just see so many wonderful stories, and I just think we as humans have a lot to be thankful for and grateful for. And I think that the news makes us think everything is negative, but I would tell you, there are a lot of really wonderful people. I see a helping hand all the time. I hear so many stories about how people support other people, and so I'd say the biggest influence for me in that external involvement is to see how people can just sometimes surprise you.
Pleasantly surprise you, right? I mean,
Yes.
the power of people coming together and, you know, being unified in something that they believe in, whether it's inside the organization or outside the organization. Tamara, would you tell me what's one habit or mindset shift that has made the biggest difference in your leadership journey? Because you've had a journey. I mean, you've done some big things, and I'm just curious about, like, is there a habit that you have or a particular mindset that you sort of, you know, lead by?
I mean, I think fundamentally I'm a person of faith, right? So at the end of the day, what guides me each and every day, what gets me up every single morning is my faith. And I think everybody has to have something that they anchor to, a value system, a core moral code that's important for them. And so for me, that's how I gain my perspective every day. That's how I reset every day. That's how I reset every night. And I need that because I don't want to get so upside down that work is the only thing I do in my life. It's important for me to serve my family. It's important for me to show up for my church. It's important to me to show up for me. And so that helps kind of reset that. I think given that, right, it sets and guides my perspective on life and people. And I'm a disruptor by nature, but disruption does not have to be negative. It can be positive because I think after you disrupt, are you rebuilding? And so, one of my philosophies of life is to leave something better than where I started it, right? And so I really try to show up from a perspective of I'm here to add value, I'm here to make your world better, and I'm here to serve you. So that it's not about me, it's about them. And I think that's a core principle that I lean into.
Yeah, you talk a lot about servant leadership, so I know that that is absolutely true. And it's not just about having faith in something that's bigger than yourself. I believe that as well, but it's also about having faith in yourself.
Yes. Yes. I mean, sometimes I could argue that I probably have too much faith in myself because I really am a self-doer. And so one of the things I actually have to work on is trusting others to do where I can't. All right. One of the biggest things I had to learn as a leader was to delegate and trust others to execute and recognize they're not going to execute the way you might execute. And that's okay. They can still get to a good positive end result. And sometimes I still struggle with that. But yes, I do think fundamentally you have to have faith and belief in yourself, or it's going to be hard for you to lead. And it's also going to be
Yeah.
hard for you to have faith and belief in others if you don't fundamentally believe in your ability to contribute and to have a positive impact.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you on that. And as we sort of land this plane, I always like to ask all of the guests that come on to Promoted, what are three qualities or characteristics that you think make someone promotable?
I think one of the first and foremost is you have to keep your word to the best that you can. If you make a commitment, you need to deliver on that commitment. And if you can't deliver on that commitment, you have to be transparent and honest as to why so that everybody can work together to adjust accordingly. But I think it's so important to operate with transparency and honesty as a leader. I think that is critical. I don't know how you can expand and create trust and loyalty of your team without it. I would say the second one is, and again, I do struggle with this sometimes, so I'll be honest, right? But you really do have to be in a posture to listen. You have to be in a posture to desire to know the people who work for you and who they are, what they're about, what motivates them, so that you can lean into that and really make sure that you're answering for what they need in terms of how they show up on your team. And I think the third is that you got to have passion for what you do. No
Mm.
one is going to follow you and believe in you if you yourself don't have the passion and the belief in what you're doing. So there's got to be a passion and a belief in what you're doing and a confidence that you can achieve it. Otherwise, you've already failed before you started.
So true. So transparency, someone who listens, and someone who has passion.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Tamara. And one final question, because I just, we love to read and we love to learn. And so I'm just curious, what are you reading now? And is there anything you want to share with the promoted community?
Oh my goodness, that is a good question. Right now, I'm reading fun stuff because I'm really stressed, to be honest with you, and I have a lot going on in my personal life. And so, when I have a lot going on at work, when I have a lot going on in my personal life, I tend to read a sci-fi fiction. But the next big business-related work I plan to read is called Multipliers: How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter
Oh,
by
yeah,
Liz
sure.
Wiseman. That is the book I plan to read next over my holiday for me as a leader to be better as a leader.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. But it sounds like you probably already know a lot of what's in that book. Let me tell you, I've read that book and I've got it in my library here. And you are already manifesting many of the things that the author is talking about. It's been wonderful to chat with you today. Thank you so much for taking your time to come out to speak to the promoted community and just talk about leadership and influence. We really appreciate it, and we hope that you'll be a friend of the show and come back again and talk to us and keep us in the fold of what's happening out there in the world of leadership.
Thank you so much. I really enjoy speaking with you. A shout out to everyone that's out there. And just remember, we are a leader at every level.
So true. Thank you, Tamara.